Our next guest is someone who's been following the developments around trans healthcare very closely, particularly the government's decision to ban puberty blockers for trans youth, a policy first introduced by Victoria Atkins and later upheld by Wes Streeting. She's here to help us unpack what that ban really means, how it compares to international medical standards, and the impact it's having on young people and their families. Please welcome Hannah Massie.
Hello, Andrea.
Perhaps before we start, could you give a brief explanation of what puberty blockers are and what they do, especially in the context of trans youth?
Okay. Puberty blockers is probably a bit of a misnomer because the chemicals that are involved, GnRHAs, antagonists, are used naturally by our bodies to control our levels of our testosterone and estrogen. So we all have them. There's nothing special about puberty blockers per se.
Yeah.
We all have them. They've been around for 300 million years and we've been using them naturally ever since.
Yeah.
In terms of treatments, they're not just used to address puberty issues in terms of puberty blocking, but a whole range of different medical conditions. They're used to treat endometriosis in both adults and teenagers. They're used to treat precocious puberty, where children start puberty at a much earlier age than they should do. They're used in cancer treatments. They're used in fertility treatments. They're a very generalised set of medications that are used universally, been around for 50 years, and have been used to in transgender youth for about that same amount of period. So there's a long history of having used them, and all they do is they just turn on and off one's estrogen production or testosterone production and help pause one's puberty process. Generally, children who take them are probably only on it for a year while they decide to buy time and decide what they're going to do. And the moment they come off of those, the natural processes then take over and puberty restarts and the natural mechanisms fall into place.
So it would be fair to say that we totally understand the side effects and...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, research, there's masses of research that show there's very limited side effects. One of the ones that sometimes gets pointed at is bone density. It was certainly picked up in the CAS report. But in fact, when you look at that, within trans women, for example, our bone densities tend to be less than is normal anyway. So it's a very difficult thing to actually pin and say that is definitely a side effect of it. Other than that, no, very little.
Okay. A lot has been made about puberty blockers not being tested for trans youth, but would you say it's unusual for medications to be prescribed for conditions they are not tested for?
Well, first of all, we have 50 years of experience and we have many reports that show positive outcomes and very few side effects. The problem we have with those is that often the numbers involved are small naturally and understandably, because the amount of trans youth that we identify is actually a very small proportion. But from what we have, then we can show a very significant benefit for very little problem, very few issues. So they are proven, and there is lots of evidence for it. It's just there are certain standards that people want to hold, which is the standard trope used by people who want to disprove a treatment. It's like, what we'll say is it hasn't been tested for 70 years when they've only been used for 50 years. So we have no long-term evidence. And, you know, it's that sort of type of, you can stitch up any sort of medication process by using those types of claims and issues. And it's just been used in this case. Interestingly enough, you know, we have 50 years of using these medications. Why not go back and look at those people who've used them over that period of time? Because many of them are in their 60s now. why not go back and do the analysis? Because you've got the cohort of people there to be able to do that analysis.
Okay.
Why do you have to start from scratch? It makes no sense. It's just a means of trying to discredit a well-proven and well-tested set of treatments.
I have heard a statistic which says that something like 30% of prescription medications have not been tested for the conditions for which they're being prescribed.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You would confirm
yes,
that?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And actually, there is the standards that puberty blockers are being held to by things like CAS report are based on some work by a professor of medicine at McMaster's University in Canada called the grade system. And 90% of the treatments and medications that we receive do not fit within their terms of what is a properly tested medication. Right. And as that professor says, that doesn't mean we should stop using them, because we have to develop that. Yeah. We have to continue using those because it's unethical and inappropriate to do so. So the fact that we're holding puberty blockers to that standard when everything else around us is not to that standard is a little bit hypocritical, I would suggest.
In 2024, shortly before the last general election, the outgoing Minister of Health, Victoria Atkins, introduced a ban on puberty blockers for trans youth, which was subsequently upheld and extended for at least 2 more years by the new Health Minister, Wes Streeting. What are your thoughts on the validity of this ban?
I think it's disgraceful, to be absolutely honest with you. All the research shows the puberty blockers are extremely safe and sensible and positive for trans youth. They are shown to reduce mental health issues among 75% of those who come and take them. So a significant benefit. I think the CAS report, which brought into question their use, was setting out to come up with a specific response, which it did, and to justify it, but that doesn't stand up to scrutiny in any sort of depth. I think, therefore, the whole thing is pretty disgraceful. I can understand Streeting's reasons for extending it, but they are purely political, not. They're not ethical or medical. They're purely political, and I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think it's causing problems and issues within trans youth that it shouldn't be doing.
Thanks. Can you talk about how this compares with international specialist bodies?
There's not one
No.
that, apart from maybe some far right extremist bodies in the States who go along with it. Anybody who is a genuine medical scientific expert disagrees with the whole process and has gone into writing expressing all the issues and concerns they have with both the CAS report and the subsequent banning of puberty blockers. There are extensive reports from Australia, even in this country, that condemn the CAS reporters. And even in America, in the American Child Psychiatric Endocrine Society, condemn it. And yet, that's being ignored.
Yeah.
And why? Well,
yeah.
I can explain that in a sec, maybe.
We will do, yes. So, in your view, what impact is the ban having on trans youth?
Well, it's stopping a very important treatment process that's proven to be very effective, and it's causing significant mental health issues and exacerbating significant mental health issues in trans youth that won't be resolved in any other way. The fact is, gender identity is known to be fixed, hardwired into our brains. It's not something you can talk someone out of. It's not caused by trauma. It's not caused by any of these other issues. It's hardwired by our biology into our brains and is fixed and can't be changed. So what happens is that somebody who is transgender, who has been assigned the wrong gender, suffers a whole series of mental issues that cause mental health harm. So there's depression, there's suicidality, the things that we know we've experienced, and they're common across all trans people. You know, everybody suffers these issues. So the condition causes the mental health. If you treat the condition, you solve the mental health problems.
You improve the mental health conditions.
If you don't treat the condition, you can't solve it. And no amount of psychological treatment, conversion therapy, or whatever you do will change it. And that has been proven multiple times. There are studies across the world that show the immutability of gender identity. So, and that it causes psychological issues that it does. So the impact, it's not treating the problem, it's increasing mental health harm. Why do you want to increase mental health harm on a specific group of people who are just have a natural, normal biological condition?
Do you think it's fair to say that the evidence and the research supporting transgender identity as being a fixed and natural occurrence actually extends back for more than 100 years, back to, for example, the Hirschfeld Institute in Berlin?
Yes, absolutely. And all of that was destroyed within by the Nazi regime. I mean, yes, there are 16,000 publications on transgender science and medicine in the last 10 years. 16,000. The research goes back over 100 years.
Yeah.
There is a mass of data, and that basically hones in on this. We understand the heritability, the fact that it is genetic. We understand that it's a polygenic condition, that is, there are multiple genes involved. We understand that hormones play a part but are not determinant. We understand that there is immutability. We understand that certain things cause behaviours that we normally relate, gender behaviours that we normally associate with one of the two genders that we in society do. It also demonstrates that gender identity itself is not binary, as sex isn't binary either, but exists on a spectrum, and that some people are in 30 to 40% of intersex people actually identify as non-binary. For example, which is a very high statistic.
Yes.
And so we know all of this stuff. It all exists and has existed and continues to exist and continues to grow. And each new study, I mean, I've just been producing a list. Most of the studies have been in the last 5 years. And they all say the same thing. And they all produce, and they're just building this whole picture of what it is that transgender identity is.
So the puberty blockers ban is actually retroactive against science?
Yes, absolutely. It's taking it's an ideological thing, taking us back to the time when we thought it's between science and behaviourism, ethology and behaviourism, should I say. Behaviourism was the idea that everything that our brains were a blank sheet of canvas and that we learnt everything. So our gender identity was formed from our upbringing, the rest of it. We then learned that actually the majority of what our brain does is hardwired and fixed by our biology, and that all the environment does is round it off, finish it off. Okay, but doesn't actually alter those core sets of behaviours. And what we're doing is we're going back to that point where we think all this stuff is supposedly learnt and it's all about conditioning and trauma and the rest of it, when we know that actually, based on everything we know about behavioural biology these days, it's actually a fixed action, what they call a fixed action pattern. It's actually hardwired behaviour that's evolved roughly 300, maybe 400 million years ago. when the first neurons evolved.
Yes.
You know, the whole point of your nervous system is to do two things. Firstly, to coordinate activity, you know, so you can have multicellular bodies. The second part of it is so you can know who you are, so that you can run away from predators and you know who to mate with. It's as simple as that. That's why you have a nervous system. And if you don't know who you are, and you have, you know, how do you know who you can mate with? You're going to end up trying to mate with the wrong person, or your predator. It's like, you know,
I do.
let's get sensible here about this.
Why do you think that trans youth are being singled out for special treatment compared to other youth, cis youth, who are also on puberty blockers?
Okay, this is very simple. There is a group of people. It came originally out of the States. There is support from elsewhere in the world, from far-right religious and political extremists, far-right political people supported by religious extremists, who believe that basically one thing only: there is only man and woman, because the Bible says so, and that that sex, there is only sex. It is binary, and it is immutable. It's nonsense, but you know, that's what the belief is. They therefore claim that transgender people cannot exist because you cannot change sex, and all we're trying to do therefore is we have an ideology that says we can change sex, and that's a false ideology because that goes against God. And so they have targeted trans people full stop and put together a very sophisticated campaign to demonise and basically remove all rights and treatments from trans folks. Kids are a really good one to target in that process, because what you're doing is you appeal to you're harming kids by doing this, by pushing this ideology onto kids, you know, changing their lives irreversibly, blah, 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 blah.
Think about the children.
Yes. I'm doing this to protect women and children. You know, we've got to stop doing this. And if you look across the, you know, in the States, many states have banned not just transgender healthcare for kids, but are starting to move that towards banning transgender healthcare full stop on those purely ideological grounds.
Yeah.
And it's been imported into this country. It's been pushed very heavily. Lots of, you know, these guys have been doing this for many, many years. So they're experts at lobbying. They're experts at media relationships. They have strategies. They know the tactics that they're going to use. And the poor trans community doesn't have that knowledge and understanding. So they're targeting trans youth because it's a very easy one to target, and it's a very easy one to elicit knee-jerk reactions from media, knee-jerk reactions from medical people, people who go, I don't know anything about this, but hey, I'll play on the safe side, which is what they're doing. They're playing on the safe side. So that's really where it comes from, and it's being very successful, sadly.
Yeah.
You know, science goes out the window.
Yes.
And ideology comes in its place. And what they want to do, of course, is they want to replace what they think is a trans ideology, but it's just the presenting of a very natural biological condition. They want to impose their own ideology around binaries, immutability, and such like. Incidentally, just about sex immutability, we can change testes into ovaries and ovaries into testes in mammals.
Okay.
Just by manipulating a couple of genes. And were those genes not functioning, we would all change sex.
Right.
Okay? So this idea of it being binary, it being immutable is just ideology. It's the ideology, not the science.
One of the ways which trans youth can access puberty blockers at the moment is on a research project.
Yes. Well, the brief for the research project that I've seen and heard about, which hasn't yet passed ethical or it hasn't been approved to be started, So this is dragging on. Although I noticed Wes Streeting was keen to get trans youth onto this. It's kind of his cop out on this subject. There's a lot of questions that they put this massive set of questionnaires to parents and kids and all the rest of it, trying to establish the psychosocial environments.
Yeah.
And in many ways, the danger we have with all of this, because many of the questions seem to be completely irrelevant, pointless, but the concerns that probably I have, and I'm sure that's reflected in many others, is that what this research does is it tries to set out not to prove the validity and use of puberty blockers or GnRHAs, but to try and establish a psychosocial cause when there isn't one.
No.
In other words, it tries to look for a specific outcome rather than accepting an outcome that's actually there. And the excessive amount of questioning suggests that is what they're trying to do. If they turn around and they say, no, we're asking this to prove that it's not, I would be happier, but I don't think that's the case, I think. It hasn't started, and we don't know when it's going to start because it's got to go through all the ethical committees and everything else. And most of what it'll prove will have been done already anyway.
Well, actually, I think this is relevant now if we move on to the CAS report.
Yes, I think I've said so.
I think you've already covered a few of the points, but how could you summarise how you think it stands up to scrutiny?
The way that I read this is that the CAS report was commissioned to come up with a specific outcome and to justify that outcome, which was to essentially suppress treatment of trans youth and to try and do this talking conversion type therapy approach.
Yes.
And to avoid medical treatment. Now, you need to understand that the only treatments trans youth are likely to get are puberty blockers or GnRHAs, and they are only likely to be on them for a year or two at the start of puberty just to buy themselves a bit of time. They inevitably, by the time they get to a year to 2 years, they've made a decision as to which direction they're going to go.
It's just basically to give them a breathing space so they can make their own mind up about whether
as they grow and they socially. So it's just a time buying mechanism, and inevitably they come to a point where they say it goes this way, or I'm not going to go this way. And so CAS came out with its report that gave the answer that it was required to give and justified it on these extreme views of, limited evidence and long-term studies, all the stuff that anybody who wants to denigrate a particular treatment used to denigrate, because obviously 90% of them don't meet top level standards.
I must admit, I always found one of the reasons that was put forward for excluding some of the international reports and research was that they were not in English. And I thought, with the amount of money and so on that was spent on the CAS report, they could have afforded a translator.
That's interesting because actually, I've got reports that are in German with English translations because English is the universal language. Any scientific report will be published not only in its native language but also in English. So you go into PubMed, for example, and you will find that there are research studies from Mexico, or research studies from Turkey, or research studies from Germany and Netherlands. And while they will be in their native language, there will also be a an English translation of it.
Yes.
So that's just a yeah, nonsense, to be honest. Absolute nonsense. The one that typically came up was that they dismissed certain things because of sample sizes, and which is a difficult one because sample sizes naturally are very small. You know, trans youth considers a very small percentage of overall youth, so the numbers inevitably are small. I mean, you know, if you look at the heritability studies, which we use twin studies for, typically monozygotic, dizygotic twins, so that's 2 eggs, 1 egg, basically. Monozygotic twins who are trans tend to be both trans. Dizygotic twins, one's trans, one may have something else, but it tends to be. But there aren't many twins that fit that category.
Yeah.
So you don't have a huge cohort of people that you can study. But the fact that if you take everything, all that research from across the world that uses that and put that together, you start to get a much better picture. And that's what's got to happen. We've just got to keep building. We think we're heading in the right direction.
Yes.
Because this is what the evidence shows. But we will get there.
We will get there.
And if you look at all these studies and all these reports, they all say more studies needed, which of course is what every single study ever does, because it means I can then get more money and I can carry on my research and I don't have to go and ask.
Yeah.
So that probably didn't answer the CAS question.
They can refine their research more.
Yeah. So I think it was basically a stitch up, and it's been condemned by all sorts of people, you know, the experts in the field. But it's a political thing. They will just ignore it. And that's we have to wait for the political environment to change.
I did actually make a note that an important aspect of scientific research is to approach a topic by examining the evidence, not with a prior fixed conclusion.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, the scientific method, it's a methodology. People misunderstand science. You come up, you do some observations, you come up with a hypothesis, you come up with a test that excludes, that basically tests purely that hypothesis and removes any potential other variables that you have.
Yeah.
If the results come out, you then analyse those results and you come out with a theory.
Yeah.
Which, because you've gone through that process, you can repeat time and time and time again. So it was a repeatable exercise. It says, this is what happens, this is what the situation is, this is the theory. We can validate that theory because we have this process that you know, we've taken out all the other potential issues and variables that might take place. So it's solid. It's not an opinion. It's not a prejudice. It's not a belief. It's a piece of fact as far as we know it.
Yes.
But every scientist knows that it's only the picture up to a certain point.
Yes.
And there's potentially always more things. So it's we always building the theories, and science is never finished.
It's the model that best matches
Yes.
the reality
Yes.
that we know at the moment.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, it dismisses any ideology, it dismisses any opinions. So somebody turning around to me and saying, I don't care what you think, I'm female and my sex is my sex, and you know, that's what's important. I can go, it's not what I think, it's what I am.
Yes.
That's what the biology, that's what the science says.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't disprove that.
Could you touch on some of the ethical considerations of following the recommendations of the CAS report? Did say just touch?
Well, why would you want to harm a group of very vulnerable people who have simply just had the misfortune to be born with a specific condition? I do not understand why that's ethical. There are no ethical or medical reasons why puberty blockers shouldn't be used.
Yeah.
You know, and they're just a natural. You know, we all have them. And we've been using. You say there's not enough evidence. There's 300 million years of evidence.
I don't say that.
You know, and there is no ethical reason or medical reason.
Yes.
It's purely an ideological reason.
And I think one of the other points which reinforces that view is that puberty blockers are only banned for one cohort of patient.
Yes.
And if there was truly a problem with puberty blockers, it
Yes.
would be banned for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. We use them for precocious puberty, we use them for endometriosis in youth. And the idea that somehow that doesn't allow the brain to mature or something like that. Well, why are we using them for that? Why are we using them in fertility? Why are we using them in cancer treatments? Why are we using them in...
Absolutely.
If they're dangerous and you ban them full stop.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't ban them for one specific group. But then this whole thing, Cass was taking information and taking it out of context and presenting it out of context.
Yeah.
And if you put the whole thing into context and look around, you suddenly realise that actually this is not good.
The government has stated that the Cass report has been peer-reviewed. What is your view?
No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't been peer-reviewed. It was never peer-reviewed. It has been peer-reviewed subsequently and dismissed.
Yes.
But it was never peer-reviewed at the time. And had it been peer-reviewed properly, it probably wouldn't have come out in the form that it's come out in. So, yeah, that's just nonsense.
Do you have any ideas about why the UK is heading in a completely different direction to most other countries in terms of trans youth healthcare, with the notable exception of the United States?
Ideology. Yeah. It's as simple as that. It's far-right, extremist religious ideology. If you look at the people who are behind the current campaign in the UK, which has been imported from the US, they're all generally religious extremists, you know, very, very fundamental, basically Christian.
Christian nationalists.
Christian nationalists is really where it's coming from. The Heritage Foundation and the Family something, FPA, I think it is, in the States wrote the initial strategy documents for what they're countering, what they called was the transgender phenomenon.
Yes.
And it's all based on that. But the people in this country, they put it in this country, and the people behind this are essentially the same types of groups of people. And what they've done is they're very cleverly, they've picked up on different groups of people to lead in specific areas.
Yeah.
So you've got women's rights groups, you know, who think they're campaigning for women's rights, but they're being fed by this school. You know, if you analyse it, you can see these different groups are all set up and run and essentially supported by this underlying structure. So it's purely ideological.
Okay. This year, the United Kingdom fell from 17th to 22nd in the ILGA Rainbow Map of Europe. How much of this do you think was due to the puberty blockers ban and the Cass report?
I think a lot of it was down to that. But there's a whole series of different activities that are taking place around trying to remove trans people from society. So we've seen Supreme Court ruling, a real ludicrous definition of sex. I mean, completely astonishingly ignorant.
Biologically and medically illiterate, I believe it was
I
a
think
phrase
that was
used.
precisely, yes. Scientifically illiterate, I think
Yes.
was what they actually said. It's like, I don't
Sorry.
believe this. These guys know nothing. And
Yeah.
of course they do know nothing because they're old fuddy-duddy judges. Oh, the Supreme Court ruling.
Supreme
yes,
Court
sorry.
ruling,
There was a
yes.
Supreme Court ruling. There has been the teaching of trans behaviour within schools has been curtailed because there is some dispute about the existence of gender identity.
Section 28, version 2.0.
Yes. Because some people dispute this. It's like no, a small group of extremists dispute this,
Yes.
but the science says that it exists and supports it. So so there's a whole set of activities banning trans women from sport is another one. Bathroom bans will be the next one. The withdrawal from medical treatments will, and that's gradually. So we're gradually seeing the rights. Well, right. Cass, and before that, the Bell case was probably one of the start points of it.
Yeah.
But it's not the only part of that reason why. It's a whole set of actions and activities that they're doing that are basically trying to eradicate trans people.
It is amazing when you reflect on that and the fact that just 10 years ago we were actually first place on that map.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think patient-centric trans-affirming research into puberty blockers efficacy would look like?
It would show what's already been shown, that there is a 75% reduction in suicidality and mental health issues within trans youth, and a significant positive outcomes, and that any of the treatments to talking treatments, be it either psychological or psychological, or conversion, if you want to give it a more extreme variant, will achieve nothing.
Yeah.
And actually, what you'll find is that for trans youth, genuine trans youth are trans and stay trans for all their lives.
Yes, it's a extremely small percentage
Yes,
that go through the trans youth process that do not then continue on to transition fully. Yeah.
The challenge is to identify that small cohort and treat them properly.
Yeah, and give them the help and support that they need.
But there's a whole set of guidelines, and it's a developing set of guidelines about consistency, persistency, insistency around this, and obviously you have to prove ultimately that you can live in the opposite gender role.
Yes.
Social transition is the first thing. Now,
yes,
before anything else happens, you have to socially transition. Now, 99.9% of people couldn't do what trans people do and go and live in the opposite gender.
Exactly.
And be happy and comfortable with it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
That's why we put social transition as the start point of any sort of proving process.
Yeah.
And why we say 2 years or 1 year or, before you actually, undertake any sort of treatment, And that's tough for those who go through it. Proving that you can hack it is, and actually that it's beneficial is a tough thing to do.
Yeah, it's true. How do you feel that this policy for trans youth healthcare may develop into trans adult healthcare?
Well, that's what is being pushed for. Is this idea that there is no need for trans. We shouldn't receive any special rights, any special treatments, because it's just an ideology. It's a religion. It's what and we don't treat religions. We don't give special rights to specific religions. Therefore, treatments should be stopped.
Yeah,
That's the start point for this campaign. So while they've managed to make some progress on the trans youth, mainly because of the weakness of those who were countering it, and and also the lack of understanding from those who are trying to counter it, they are after trans healthcare, and in fact there is currently a review taking place of adult services and adult trans healthcare.
Just the Levy, Levy review,
and again, will it be one of those where it comes out with the answer that it was supposed to come out with, or will it come out with something that is actually realistic and genuine?
We may have covered some of this already, but one of the talking points we see a lot of discussion about, and was mentioned in the Supreme Court ruling, was the term biological sex. What do you understand this to mean?
What I understand this to mean is there's a whole group of people who haven't learnt biology beyond nursery school. It's basically nursery school biology, oversimplified and wrong. It's just absurd. This idea that you live in a binary environment is just, and that it's all immutable, is just nonsense. You can be anyone. You can take chromosomes. You can be XY and be female phenotype. You can be XX and be a male phenotype. Chromosomes don't determine sex. No. And you can be X0, you can be XXY, you can be XXX, you can be XYY, you can be all sorts of
any number of different variations.
So we'll cancel chromosomes as being any sort of form of sex differentiator. Although that is what has traditionally people say. It's always simple. It's you're either XX or you're XY. No. And a significant proportion of people aren't that. So let's move on. We discovered something called the SRY gene, which exists on the generally exists on the Y chromosome, which incidentally is a bit of a spurious chromosome because it's in a lot of mammals they've quite often just don't have them at all because it's not really needed. It doesn't. But the SRY gene is the one that triggers around about 6 weeks the development of male characteristics. Except it doesn't all the time. You can have no SRY gene and still develop male characteristics because it's just one of a whole set of genes that are involved in sexual differentiation.
And they all have to be there and in the right sequence?
Yes.
Yeah.
And up until that point, you're actually essentially female. So this idea that God made man and then made woman is actually wrong. He made woman and then made man, but which would make those biblical people's heads explode.
Would that mean that every male person is actually a female to male transgender person?
Absolutely. Although, to be fair, the natural default state is not necessarily female. There are genes that trigger that do some feminization stuff. So there's genes involved, but we also know there's a whole range of epigenetics involved, environment involved. And in fact, sex determination in mammals is generally genetic, but it has, in other animal species, it's not genetic. It's heat, for example. There are numerous animals who change sex. Finding Nemo, completely wrong.
Clownfish,
Completely wrong, because Nemo's a dad, and if Mum had died, he would change sex, literally change sex, and become Mum. So Finding Nemo is complete nonsense from a biological standpoint. Nice story, but and so this idea that you can define something called biological sex is really it's not possible, because there are so many factors involved, and it is such a variation. 2% of people are born intersex, and that's what we know of. It could be considerably more because people can go through life without.
Yeah.
And we have polychimerism. 21% of women who've not had any male children have both X and XY chromosomes in their cells.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's such a complicated subject. This idea that it's binary, this idea that there's only this and this and it's not immutable. Biological sex is, but that has nothing to do with gender, which is a completely separate attribute.
Absolutely.
It's a set of behaviours hardwired into your brain that tells you who you are, and it gives you a set of gender role behaviours that enable you to bring up offspring in the world.
Yeah.
You know, birds build nests. That's a gender behaviour. You see mother ducks. Incidentally, only 50 to 60% of in mammals, actually, it's the female, what we call the female, does the upbringing. 60%. Male cassowary in Australia, they do the bringing up of the chicks.
Yeah.
There are many mammals, particularly among primates, where they're called pair bonding species, where one produces the baby and the other one does the upbringing because they share the energy involved in doing it. My favourite is, and I think I've said this before, is the black hamlet fish, which they are sequential hermaphrodites, so they change sex every breeding season.
Okay.
So every breeding season, one does the male bit, one does the female bit, and then they swap round the following year. And if one doesn't do it, the other one sits there sulking until gives in. It's, you know.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that there's these rules when there isn't. Sex exists on a spectrum, and gender, which is a completely different attribute, also exists on a spectrum, and they're not necessarily tied together.
Yes.
And the divisions we make in those spectrums are the social constructs. So sex, as we see it, is a social construct. Gender, as we see it, being male, female, is a social construct. And the fact that we in the Western world, and it's only the Western world, tie gender and gender identity to sex, to a sex side, is purely a Western and it's purely a social construct. Many other cultures across the world support multiple genders, up to 5. Many others also support 3 sexes to cater for the intersex condition. So it's a very complicated, and anybody who talks about biological sex simply doesn't know what they're talking about.
So the British Medical Association were correct?
Oh, it's completely illiterate, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's also exclusionary.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they said. They said, you're excluding real people who are naturally, biologically valid.
Yeah. And finally,
Yes.
is there anything else you would like to say to our audience?
What I'd like to say is that this is a complicated subject. Its basis is biological. It's confused by our society. We need to identify and separate out sex and gender. In fact, what we know is that our sex biology only partially defines our gender identity. It's not directly corresponding. We just need to expand our understanding a little bit and recognise that sex is not binary, it's not immutable. Gender is different, it's not binary. One is a set of behaviours, one's a set of physiology, and the divisions that we make and the rules that we associate are purely social constructs. And when it comes to gender, we add some specific on top of that. We add a whole lot of social rules about clothing or women are only allowed to do this. You know, we see this across societies in that we apply social rules to And we mistakenly call those social rules gender as well. They are societal constructs, but the underlying core stuff is purely biological. It's a set of hardwired behaviours. And it's not difficult, it just needs somebody to continue, or people to understand that very, very simple difference, including judges and including
Yes.
Cass.
And Wes.
Sorry?
And Streeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Streeting's an interesting one because when he came to power, he had a difficult situation. The puberty blockers had got a temporary ban. If he had lifted that, the right-wing media would have gone bananas, and he would have started off on the wrong foot. And so he didn't do that. He couldn't sit on the fence because he would be continued to be lobbied, and he'd already been very heavily lobbied anyway by the people. So he couldn't sit on the fence. He basically in extending the ban for a couple of years, it got all that off his back. And essentially, he tried to brush it under the carpet. So you will we'll put people at risk. We'll use this as an excuse, the Cass report as an excuse for doing it. But it gets this stuff on, and I can focus on that.
Yeah.
Other things, fair enough. It also means that he was able, and he subsequently demonstrated this in some of the Mumsnet conversations that he had, very much trying to distance himself as a gay man from the LGBT community.
Yes.
And so by sticking on that side, he's seen to be distancing himself, and he's a good gay man, as opposed to one of. So that's really the background to that. In the long term, it's not a sustainable situation.
So thank you, Hannah, for sharing your insight and helping us to understand the wider context behind this issue. It's clear that the so-called debate around puberty blockers and trans healthcare more broadly isn't just about medicine, but about compassion, evidence, and the right for young people to be supported rather than stigmatised. As we continue these conversations, it's vital that policy reflects lived experience and scientific integrity, not fear, politics, or ideology. Thank you again, Hannah, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.